Dear guests, welcome back. I hope you're all refreshed and ready to watch the last panel of our Istanbul Education Summit. The title of this panel is A New Sustainable School Culture. Now, a new and sustainable school culture, it embraces an approach that prioritizes not only academic success, but also students' social, emotional, and environmental responsibilities. This culture supports diversity, inclusivity, and equality in education, allowing students to listen to and appreciate different perspectives. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our guests that are joining us from across the globe. Moderating the panel is Professor Dr. Hayati Akyol with the Department of Basic Education, Faculty of Education at Gazi University. Joining Professor Akyol are Professor Takaharu Tezuka at the Faculty of Architecture and Urban Design Department of Architecture at Tokyo City University. I'd also like to welcome CEO and founder of Designing Schools, Dr. Saba Kudwai. And last but not least, Dr. Claire Al-Kwatli. She carries a PhD in Human Development, Learning and Culture at the University of South Australia. Thank you all for being with us here today. Over to you, Professor Akyol.
To say good afternoon to everyone. Before starting our panel, I'd like to welcome to our panelists and all participants and greet them with respect. My name is Hayati Akyol and I work at Gazi University, Gazi Education Faculty, Department of Basic Education. My field of study is reading education and reading programs. I'll be moderating today's panel. First of all, I would like to thank the Marif Foundation and all the team who organized the meeting, and I'd like to emphasize that I am happy to be here. Our panelists, I think, introduced by our speakers shortly. I will say a couple of sentences regarding the issue. Our panel title today is New Sustainable School Culture. And I'd like to mention a couple of sentences related to this topic. Creating a new sustainable school culture involves designing an environment where education, community, and the natural world intersects harmoniously. It means going beyond just teaching about sustainability. It is about living, it is practicing, and making it a core part of the school experiences. This culture fosters an ethos of responsibility, interconnectedness, and resilience. For establishing this type of culture, we might do in schools like integrate sustainability into the school curriculum, foster an eco-conscious community, eco-friendly school infrastructure, zero waste and resource efficiency, school and emotional learning tied to sustainability, collaboration with local organizations and experts, and also long-term cultural shifts. As a summary, I'd like to say that a new sustainable school culture is one that does not simply teach sustainability, but embodies it in every facet of life within the school. It is about developing future leaders who understand that the well-being of our planet is tied to the well-being of humanity, and that they have a role to play in preserving both. This kind of culture requires a holistic community-driven approach where sustainability becomes part of the school's identity and everyone practices. It is not just about greening the campus, it is about embedding sustainability into the very fabric of education and life. In this framework, our esteemed speakers will analyze the subject from different perspectives and share their views. I'd like to thank them in advance. As I said at the beginning of our panel, our presentations will be made in 2 rounds. Our speakers will have 12 minutes for each round. And I'd like to first start with Dr. Claire Alcautli. Dr. Claire, please, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akil. It's really lovely to be here. Very briefly, my background is in human development, learning, and culture. And I will start us off on an intimate note. This is a presentation delivered to each and every adult who's here. So that may sound a strange way to start off talking about sustainability, but I hope you're going to follow this thread of thinking. So I'm sharing my screen now. My topic is looking at the educator at the heart of educational sustainability. And as you will see, we're really looking at the educator's superpowers here. So just to begin, I wanted to remind everybody of the SDG goal number 4, aiming for inclusive and equitable quality education to promote lifelong learning and opportunities for all. So what I want to do here is actually go deep into what it means to be inclusive and equitable and what quality education is. And my main idea is that there is no inclusion, sustainability, or quality unless you have a robust educator at the center who's going to engage learners. And these educators, I just want to point out, are education happens in every facet of life. So the first thing we think about are within schools, and that is incredibly important. There are many educators in a school setting beyond the teacher, including the environment, the administrative staff, the school leaders. We are all responsible for the development of children. But educators are also out there in the community. We're the adults in the lives of kids. We're parents, we're uncles and aunties, we're community leaders, we're community members. And so I'm really speaking to everybody when I ask, what does this mean at the level of the individual educator? Okay, so we are all educators. And what does this mean at the level of the educator-learner relationship? So I'm going to pose 3 brief questions in my 12 minutes. The first is, who is the human being that we are aiming to educate and develop? Because what I want to suggest, and at the heart of my own work, is that we often have too narrow an understanding of the human being at the center of education. So who is this human being? Towards what objectives are we aiming to educate and develop this human being? And how can the educator catalyze education and development? 3 simple questions. I'm going to argue that they are at the heart of educational sustainability, and let's explore why. So before I go forward, I just, as an academic, I do need to tell you where I'm drawing this information from. So this is based on my own doctoral research with 32 Canadian educators, where I asked them about their pedagogies. Okay, I'm specifically focused on, I wanted to know the methods of teaching and learning by which they engaged young learners. I'm also drawing from Vygotsky's sociocultural theory, and you'll see some key quotes by this Russian developmental psychologist. And I'm also drawing upon some contributions from Islamic psychologists. This is in English in the mainstream academy. This is a new and growing field, although it's a timeless tradition, as people know. I'm also sharing just some educational curios that I gathered along my own learning journey, because I'm really fascinated by this question of how can we foster child development. So very quickly, a couple of definitions. We're looking at education as it happens across the lifespan in various places, leading to the development of the whole human being. So I'm not only looking at schools, although that is a prime venue, obviously. And then development refers to the changes in a person's psychological functions and behavior with the passage of time, as a function of biological, sociocultural, and environmental influences. So I really wanted you to just be grounded in how I'm using these terms, and you can see that I'm using them in quite expansive ways. Okay, so first question, who is the human being that we are aiming to educate and develop? So I'm suggesting that we need to look broader. We need to look deeper. We are more than just a body and a mind with some emotions on the side. So according to the Islamic psychologists, we also have a pure nature that's responsive to truth and beauty and goodness, called the fitrah. We also have a nafs, which is a multi-layered self, with the lowest levels requiring self-discipline and refinement, and the highest levels ultimately would guide us to our highest potential. We also have a combination of aql as cognition or intellect unified with the qalb, which is known as the emotion or heart, and both of which have spiritual dimensions. Okay, this is from the work of the Islamic psychologists. Then we have a soul or a spirit, which is a pure, non-individual aspect of the human being with an inclination towards growth. It's been referred to as a center of consciousness that is inherently connected to a broader consciousness. So I'm drawing here from the work of some Islamic psychologists with the hope that we can really think about these dimensions that we want to engage. Like knowing that a child has these dimensions changes the way that we engage young people. Okay, and this is, I'm just giving you tips of the iceberg, but this was, it came to my attention with my research participants when one of them said, when you understand something, you're in a better position to deal with it. And what this means is that if we recognize these deep dimensions of the human being, we are in a better position to be able to engage those dimensions. That's where the transformation happens. Second question, what are we aiming for? Towards what objectives? So here, I want to ask you these questions about what is the beautiful child growing towards? Who is the ideal human that we're aiming to educate? This person might be somebody who's your companion later on. This might be somebody who raises your grandchildren. This might be somebody who represents your country to the world. And this might be somebody who contributes beauty and benefit to the world and its creatures. So I really want us to be thinking of the highest end of human development that we're aiming for. Okay, we really need to be thinking at this high level. And what I always ask of my teacher, I am a teacher educator. So what I ask of my teachers is draw that child. I want to see what that child's going to look like. And so these are some drawings that my students have done. Okay. So the third question, and this is really the meat of my presentation, is how can the educator catalyze education and development? How can each one of us, regardless of how we're enacting education, whether we're a teacher, a school leader, a parent, or a community member, how can we do this? So I'm only going to talk about two, but the first one is love. And here I bring in Vygotsky, who said that affect, meaning emotion, positive affect, is the alpha and the omega, the first and the last link, the prologue and the epilogue of all mental development. That is a huge statement when the Western world, over time, since the Industrial Revolution and potentially before, has been focusing on the cognitive rather than the emotional dimensions of education. And yet, Lev Vygotsky here is saying that affect is at the heart of all mental development. So this is where we're starting. And then studies have shown that just one adult at school, children did better at school when they had a good relationship with that one adult, which is so beautiful. And that's what we want to be to children, right? It's easy. It's so easy to do that. How can we do that with every single young person? And then Yuri Bronfenbrenner, another mega theorist in developmental psychology, said children need at least one person who is absolutely crazy about them. And what I love about this is that a child knowing that is able to be so much more resilient if they know that they have an adult standing behind them. Other studies have suggested that children do better at school if they have just one friend. They're so much more resilient to bullying. So how, as educators, can we foster that one friend? Okay, so this is my final quote on this topic, is that love, loyalty, and consistency seem to matter more than methods of teaching. What this should be suggesting to us is that we all have the potential to be transformative educators, regardless of what the topic we're teaching and potentially even the methods. So if we start with love, loyalty, and consistency, we can go really far with our young people. And so it looks like this. If you think about love as a developmental catalyst, this is what you can actually do. So you love what you do and you express that to kids. There's nothing more inspiring than a role model who loves what they do. Love learning. So exhibit your own love of learning to your students. Love your students. Foster love between students. Love the majesty and the mystery of existence and express that love as awe. So these are just some ideas about ways you can actually center love within the learning environment. And I hope you can see the implications of inclusivity here is that there's no barriers to this, okay? So the second catalyst that I want to bring your attention to is final forms. So this is again Lev Vygotsky, really of child development are present in the environment from the very beginning. What this means is that, unlike other areas of life, within child development, the final forms are there, and children are engaging with them at all times. What I love about this picture is that here you have a much older kid who is on his way towards final or idealized forms, and he has inspired all these children to do an impromptu prayer together in a mosque that they came across. So it's so having that role model, that elder person, and it doesn't even have to necessarily be a full adult. Okay, so this should prompt us to ask, what or who are the ideal forms of child development? So an example is when a child speaks in babbles, the adult answers in the final form of the language. This is the quintessential example of how children engage with final forms to develop, right? When a child is blah, 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 blah to us as adults, we don't respond in that language. We respond in the beautiful final form of the language, and engaging with that final form, the child develops. Okay. So I want us to be thinking about, what does this mean in terms of holistic learning and development beyond language? What does it mean? What are we role modeling in the environment? So one of my own research participants articulated this by saying, I can't give something I don't have. You cannot pour from an empty jar. So I cannot teach something or plant something that I don't have myself. And so what this should prompt us to ask is, what do we have? And how can we enhance what we have? We need to do a survey of our strengths and a survey of our challenges, and then build upon our challenges. And so how it looks like is that we develop learners by developing our own selves in terms of the dimensions that I already mentioned. So we need to be holistically developed as adult educators in order to model the final forms with young people. So my take-home message is that every adult is an educator with the potential to catalyze learning and development. Every single one of us. And I think, I'm really interested to take this into environments where children are missing education or their education has been truncated, because it is the ultimate inclusive and sustainable educational culture. And at the end of the day, we need to invest in our educators, and those could be adults in any area of education. So thank you so much. I'll stop sharing now.
I thank you to Dr. Claire Alcautli using the time proficiently, and she focused on 3 points in education, starting with the framework of inclusiveness and equitability. And she raised 3 questions: who is the human being? And what type of objectives should be following to raise the human being that we want? And how can educators succeed this type of objectives concerning the developmental perspective in education? Thank you for her enlightening presentation. And secondly, I'll give the floor to Dr. Sabba Kuudbey. Welcome, Dr. Sabba.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful presentation to be able to follow up from. Because one of the things that I thought was really interesting was yesterday, Professor Falk really talked about that challenge in a very direct way. He actually started his presentation by saying that, like, given the world's conditions and limits on the autonomy of many educators, faculty, administrators, and even students, it's really easy to feel disempowered. And, when I hear Dr. Claire talk about how every child needs somebody who believes in them, I think we really see the impact of that later in life when you grow up not having somebody believe in you in that way. You in turn become somebody who doesn't believe things are possible. And I think that's where the root cause of many of these challenges for us really come from. And so he said, this is the challenge, right? That we have to be able to solve for so that innovation and collaboration can really thrive. So this is something that I hope to be able to talk a little bit about today. In the first sort of 12 minutes, I'd really like to focus on the learner, the student, the young people. And in the second half, I'd like to focus more on the adults and the educators for how they can be more empowered to do some of these different things. But a guiding question in my work, so I'm a former history teacher, and now we work with schools on AI and technology integration. But one of the core questions that drives all of our work, this is our vision, is how do we create cultures of innovation that begin with a culture of empathy? Because like Dr. Claire so beautifully kind of shared right before, if we don't talk about our own challenges and we don't survey our own challenges and we don't survey also our own motivations, what are the things that interest us, that motivate us, that inspire us, it's very hard to sort of design anything on top of that because we're not keeping the needs of the people really in mind as we are designing. And so I think this was like echoed a little bit earlier as well in the beginning, but I just wanted to really kind of reframe that sustainability is so much more than just like the environment. It's really the importance of alignment between all of the different areas, from people, right, their well-being, fairness across all communities, but also prosperity, how we grow economies responsibly without harming the planet or people, all in the service of being able to protect our natural planet and the things that we have. And prosperity and sustainability and these terms are so interesting these days because you have many different CEOs. This is just one from like Sam Altman, where he writes, especially with AI, I think there was a new sort of like lens to how we think about prosperity in the future and our ability to solve challenges and solve some of these very pressing problems. He says with these new abilities we can have shared prosperity to a degree that seems unimaginable today in everyone's future. Everyone's lives can be better than anyone's life is now. But I would say a very key word in the phrasing is can, right? Like it's not we will have this, it's we can have this. So what do we need to do to be able to make sure that, everybody is able to take advantage of the different opportunities that are given to them? But most importantly, if we're going to do that, like I said, like Dr. Claire was such a beautiful one to follow, if we're going to do this, we have to be able to spark agency and hope within our educators to be able to innovate within constraints. Because too often, I think we do hear, we can't do this because of this, or we can't do this because of that. And when we hear those kinds of limiting beliefs, it's definitely, a reality that many of us face. Constraints are everywhere, but our ability to see beyond constraints and be able to, sort of like identify different areas and solutions is really where I think the opportunity lies for us. So there are many different strategies and things like that we can share with you. But what I wanted to do is share one example that we are seeing have a really, really, really significant impact on what people see as possible in their spaces. And so this actually started a couple of months ago, where we were invited by 15 different international schools to bring their student leadership teams together. So it was about 15 schools and about 260 students. And the focus for them in bringing these students together was to ask, how do we design an experience that integrates artificial intelligence into sustainability focused community service projects? So these were many like IB schools and things along those lines. And they really wanted their young people to learn about integrity, about ethics, but also in alignment with community service and what AI could do in this particular role. So in this particular experience, what we did was we used a method called design thinking. And what makes design thinking, I think, really unique from many other methods is that it begins with empathy, right? It begins not with an answer. It begins not with a solution. It doesn't begin by telling you what you should do. It begins by really sort of evaluating and asking people within the community to talk to each other, right? To, kind of move beyond, a lot of times we also stay in our silos. Educators only talking to educators, administrators, not always, talking to everybody, students not being part of the conversation, community members not always being part of the conversation. And so design thinking really encourages you to make everybody a part of that conversation through empathy and things like that. So that's the method that we went in to teach the students. And so design thinking, I will also say, is unique because it's not just a method, like begin with empathy, prototype something, test something. It's also a mindset around, okay, we don't have the answer. We don't know what the solution is going to be, but how might we come up with something? And one step at a time, we will work towards that, with the understanding that you're comfortable with ambiguity because you know that your first try is not your last try. And so the students initially had a list of different topics that they could choose from for their different projects that they wanted to work on. So you'll see here, there's everything from environmental responsibility to how might we create better school environments for you and enhance your education, to health and wellness and community, to volunteering resources, and to just communication and awareness. So there were 3 different workshops that we did with the students. Now, you can take this and, you could really modify this to whatever your individual scenario is. But we did 3 workshops with the students. The first one was looking at what are the strengths of artificial intelligence tools, and then what are your human strengths, and what does that collaboration look like as you think about making decisions for when and where you use different things. The second workshop was, now that you know what the AI strengths are and you know what your individual strengths are, what topic are you going to choose as your final one? And how are you going to take that idea and make it something actionable? And this is where the design thinking process really, really, really helps, because it's very easy to get lost in the ideas of something. But what's your plan? What are you going to do in the next 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months? That's kind of how we organize it with them. They're able to do that very, very, very quickly. And then in the third workshop, we focus on presentation and pitching. So don't just, talk about your idea, show people, what are you going to test? How are you going to implement it? What are your first steps going to be? And I feel like, these pictures, I think, really sort of describe and just speak to the entire experience, because you can just see here how engaged they are. And, when we talk about, again, strengths, we talk about believing in people, and we talk about all these different qualities. It really does start, I think the younger it starts, the more you can take that into adulthood. And when you are given the strategies for actually addressing complexities, challenges, ambiguity, which is such a consistent part of our world today, you really do become more confident at dealing with many of the different variables that you are often faced with. And this isn't just something that is important just from a human development perspective. This is also, workplaces are looking for these skills as well. This was a study that was done last year. Really, before we used to see things like problem solving, creativity, and it's not to say those don't matter anymore, but it's almost like those have just become the norm. Now people are looking for integrity, ethics. Can you motivate and inspire other people around you? So these students, like you can see, they're just so young, but honestly did some of the best presentations that, like I've seen in a really long time. And one of the frameworks that we introduced, because we too often, when it comes to complexity, see many people, especially with AI right now, wanting to either ban, block, or give rules. You can do this here, but you can't do this there. And one of the things that we think is so important for young people right now is agency, being able to learn and engage in the messiness of making decisions in a safe space with those adults who love you and believe in you around you, so that you can fail in a safe way, and learn again and again and again from those things. So one of the frameworks that we often share, as we encourage people to either include as part of a rubric when students are utilizing artificial intelligence in particular, is what we call WISE. And you can really apply this framework to any technology. In this case, we have artificial intelligence, but it's really just will it affect my well-being and those around me? Am I using AI with integrity? What skills am I learning, and what skills might I be losing? And does it help me engage better as a learner in my outcomes? And you could just see here some of their responses. It was so incredible just to see the different thoughts and the different ideas it is that they had when you give them this agency and you really give them the space to be able to create with the structures and with the right facilitation that comes from the adults. So that's sort of that part that I wanted to share in terms of the students. I'm sure many people might be thinking, well, I don't know how I could do this as an educator. Where do I even begin? I have to teach this class, this class, this class. So hopefully in the next round, we will focus in on the educator and what it is they can be able to do with these tools to be able to create these environments.
Thank you for Dr. Saba for this informing presentation. She mainly focused on the question of how schools can develop sustainable culture by centering the children. And in this process, he focused on also using AI-based activities in schools to develop our children. Thank you. Finally, for this round, I'd like to leave the floor to Dr. Takaharu Tezuka. Please, Dr. Takaharu, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. If you can hear me, could you raise a hand? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Okay, it's good. Okay, first of all, I need to tell you my background, because I'm not an educator. Okay, I'm not a researcher. I'm an architect. But at the same time, I tell you, I'm designing many pedagogical structures, architectures. And here now I'm at Los Angeles today, talking about school. So my career is very complex. And the topic of the class here in UCLA I'm having is the school for sharing. Okay, that is going to be very important topic for me. Our school was a place where we have to give knowledge. Okay, but the knowledge is more private. Okay, you have to build up, but that cannot serve society. I think we want to change our knowledge to wisdom so that we can share the things. Okay, so it's about sharing. So I'm going to show you what I have done in the past. Okay, and so I start sharing the screen. Now okay. to PowerPoint. Okay, this is the school we designed, and many people knows it's called Donuts sometimes, and it's called Fuji Kindergarten too. And as you know, there's a tree hopping through, so you see that the kids are running on top, and then kids love to jump with the net. These things. I'm not showing a class. I'm showing what they do. You know, this boy loves the tree, so the boy is eating the tree. Okay. Oops, sorry. And then it's nice to see kids sitting on the edge. And then monkey in the zoo, feeding time. And when we designed school, nobody believed this is possible. But somehow, OECD found out this is a new way of education because there's no wall between classrooms. So elderly and young, all these people are studying together. That is what we're doing. And you can see that the kids on top, anything's going on. And also you can see that what our water tap is not just a water tap. The boy is not washing his boots. He's putting water in the boots. And this is inside the classroom. You can see that there is no wall between classroom. So people say, "Oh, what's going on about sound?" But interesting thing is that the kids are capable of selecting the sound from a strong background noise. And that is what human beings are, especially before 8 years old. They have such a kind of capability. And the silence is a big problem. Okay? Actually, so background noise is good for them. And if you want to know more about it, but yeah, you have to read my paper. And I published that from Harvard. But today I don't have time to talk about. And also, people worried about, what are we going to do if the temperature, the weather is bad? Kids get wet. But the thing is, the kids are waterproofed. In Japan, we can wash kids clean. Okay, so I think that we are doing quite unusual things, but this is how kids were supposed to be, and this is how we make a classroom. We share the classroom, but these boxes, they were supposed to help teacher. They never do. Okay, that is what we did. But I think you know this school already, so I'm going very quick. A monkey trying to fish another monkey. And the Santa Claus comes down from the skylight and the lights. Okay, this is the how school is looking like. And this is the movement of the boy between 10 past 9 to 30 past 9. Within 20 minutes, he made this much, and he made 6 kilometers before the lunchtime. And you can see that how kids are moving around. And on top, they are sharing, kind of environment with friends. Underneath of this dish, and they are sharing space. And because there is nothing in the middle, you can see each other. So it's very interactive. That's what we have been doing, and you can see that how they free are. And some professor come to this place. What happens? They bump each other. They are moving different directions. And the principal says, "Oh, nobody has died yet." So I'm going to show you some class schools. Again, this school has no edge. Like this. Okay? So kids moving around. And also there's no boundary between inside out. So that is what we did. Okay, you can see that, it's really open. And also I'm showing my museum. And I'm running a museum. I'm director at the president of the museum. And you can see that we are doing some creative work, and also we pray. Okay, I can show you much faster. Okay, and the mother is running, and also we do music class here, and we invite sometimes Tokyo Film Hub Orchestra, top orchestra. People think kids don't like classical music, but it's not true. Just they hate seat numbers. So you can see a boy coming close to the instrument. He calls to the music, but the point is, it's about choice. We are not giving them order. They are choosing what they want to do. And my wife is sleeping in front. Okay. And also, I can show you what happens. Disaster. They're happy. Okay. Now I'm showing another project just ongoing in India in Ahmedabad. And this is not a diagram I made. They are trying to make some kind of more interactive method. And also they are thinking how they can share the nature and the environment with others. And they're saying, okay, this is very big postal land. It's about 80,000 square meters. So we want to coexist with trees. So we try to include everything, one space. But interesting about this school is that, that classroom is not square. You share the space. So 5 classroom has one common space. And actually we can say open space. And then 5 as the open spaces are sharing everything. Okay. So it's like living organism. And also there are trees coming in. So trees and the classes, all these about sharing. It's very interactive. So that's what I'm doing. And then also just we talk about the trees, but I don't think this is a big topic. But I'm gonna show you how the place is looking like. You can see that the building is designed to embrace nature. And so wherever you go, you see, school classrooms are popping out in the nature, and it's very green. Okay. And also, I need to show this building called the mothership, and this is the space for shares ideas with many open spaces. And this is the open space about between the 5 classrooms, and then the classroom open up to green. So there's you don't see any boundary, just everything's about sharing, and this is quite organic. That is what we have been working on. And then this is Austria. Maybe I don't need to talk about much, but it's about sharing. And so this I can show you another project, and it's almost completing in Dubai. They want to have a progressive education. They are going to educate people until 18 years old. And this is a sketch. There's no boundary classrooms. And this is how the classroom is looking like. And then, hold on just a moment. What's going on? Sorry. Stop. Oh, excuse me. I don't know what happened. Sorry, just a moment. I think something wrong with it. Okay, now it's moving. Sorry. After this, I made a sketch and how the classroom is looking like. It's like a cell. And this is a very early presentation. We did, actually, this is the middle of Dubai at the big park, Safa Park. And this shape of the building is based on the traditional building. And we are making oasis. Inside, you can see the space is quite open. So after making, by the way, on the middle, I'm trying to bring in my museum inside so that they can do the creative things. This is a classroom. And the important thing is how can absorb the sound. That is what we do. So this is a kind of school we have been designing now in Dubai. And this finally, I want to show this project. It's very important. This is the school deep in the Himalayan mountain in India. Deep Himalayan mountain. And then they said that they want to make a school, but very deep, 500 kilometers across the city. And there's a bank. I started the school 90 years ago, but this school became the best in the region. And 95% of the children go to university. But all these are orphan. And their education is amazing. This is Tibetan Buddhism. And this is the idea. It's called Shunyata. It's based on Zelo. They share the ideas and we transform that idea into architecture. The idea is sharing knowledge between 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. It's just numbers. So they said, knowledge doesn't work. Okay, so you have to have a wisdom. So it's about sharing. And this is how they start education, putting seed, and they digest, and they share, and they share, and share. And I tested that in my university, back in with the university students, what's the distance we can work with, and then they tested in India. This is a kind of classrooms we have been working with, and this plan we have been doing now. And then we made a model. It's a timber, and we are trying to use local construction because I don't want to local to lose the money. And so we are trying this with students, but I'm running out of time. So you can see that how
a shared
happy kids are.
education without walls. If we could share that vision around the world, perhaps we could
They don't
transform
have
society
anything,
for the
they have
better.
just one cardboard box, but they're happy. The school, how it's looking like, and that's the end. And I can show you just one interesting
The
school.
children at this kindergarten spend 2 days a week surrounded by nature.
So these kids go to forest school.
They take a 15-minute ride on the bus to this quirky building in the forest, shaped like a witch's hat.
And I
Was
show you how
designed
it
to
looks like.
act as a prism. The couple
So inside, there's the lights. Kids play with the light, but these are natural light with prism. And also, interesting thing
but
is
don't wall the
building.
children off from the outside world.
So 50% of the building is outside. They spend more time outside than inside. So this is their friend.
Deputy Principal Takisawa Michiko.
お日様が入るね、光もそうですけれど、日差しが私は好きだなと思ってます。外で雨の中を耳を澄ますっていうことってなかなかないと思うんですね。きっと子どもたちこうやって遊びながらもすっごく働いてるので。
So I think it's enough for my presentation. But also my presentation is about sharing. How we can transform the knowledge into wisdom. And the sharing doesn't stop within the school, the community, and economy, and so nature. Thank you very much. Okay, that's it.
Okay, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Takahoro. He is presented us the new architectural ways of designing classrooms. And the idea was that we can create learning areas without barriers, without walls. Thank you for him for this nice presentation. So we right now finished our first round, and we will be starting our second round, and we'll follow the same order as we had in the first round. So the first turn is for Dr. Claire Alcautli. Please, Dr. Alcautli.
Thank you so much. Thank you to my colleagues for their amazing presentations. I had actually learned about the donut school from when I was doing my PhD at the University of British Columbia in Western Canada. I saw a video about it, and we were learning about it in terms of promoting social and emotional development and really enabling kids to just express themselves and be kids. So what I would like to do with these 12 minutes is really open it up to discussion and dialogue. I don't want to present anymore or talk anymore. I would love to either invite questions and then ask questions of my colleagues. Is that okay, Professor?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah. So, I should make a question. I think you were talking about the love. I think there's a big difference between love and compassion. Love is something for particular, and the compassion for everybody. And could you elaborate how these things do for education? Because there has never been social connection between these two in school.
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question. So love is different from compassion. And it's also different, but related to empathy, which is what Dr. Sabo is also mentioning. So it would be really nice to bring those together and talk a little bit about why they're so important. So I guess the first thing regarding love is what it does to the brain chemistry. Yeah, so it's this idea that if children feel love, their brain is flooded with the feel-good hormones, and they're open to learning. And so, you know, when I was looking at the designs of your schools, and you look at the expressions on children's faces, you see joy, you see happiness, and you see love. And so, creating environments like that for children to explore is nurturing those feelings of love and the brain hormones that promote learning, right? And so, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that an environment alone is a great facilitator, but it's not necessarily enough. Because you can imagine if there was one kid alone in one of these amazing buildings, or if there were a group of kids, but one kid was being bullied, right? So I think it's the unity of these amazing spaces that it prompt us to think about learning in new ways, along with really thinking about the relational environment within the schools.
I think just a problem of the school these days, actually it has been, is that the school was about competition. How can you be clever than others? But that is creating a problem, especially in Europe and in the States and some developed countries, because everybody wants to go to university, and then you find out there is no person working on the field, and society collapses. So I think I think we should really think about how we can change education. Maybe no test, and also you should know that maybe it's I'm going to this is going to be next topic. Dr. Kwandwai Sabra, I don't know how she was talking about AI. AI is going to change that a lot because knowledge can be obtained from in the kind of computer. So it changes everything. I think change is coming. It's a base is, I think, as you said, it's love. How you can the empathy, like you have empathy.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I just wanted to mention about empathy, and Dr. Sabat touched upon it as well, is this idea that empathy involves imagination. It's very difficult to be truly empathetic unless your imagination, your imaginative faculty is engaged, right? And the imaginative faculty is something that we are all working towards. And I can see it in your spaces, Dr. Tezuka. I can see like it's really stimulating the imagination, because if you provide this kind of open space for children to use however they see fit, you're inviting them to imagine, inviting them. How do they want to use the space? How do they want to position themselves in the space? And I'd like to talk for a tiny minute about the juxtaposition between this open kind of invitation and creativity, and what Dr. Sebo was talking about in terms of the constraints, because we have constraints, we have challenges in society. Like, we don't live in a society where there's no constraints, and the constraints themselves can trigger real creativity. Sometimes people can be more creative when they have more restraints. So I wondered your thoughts on these, like how can we do both? And are there times and places for each one?
I think it's the question to another speaker. I think, Doctor, I think you should talk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm going to share a little bit of that in when I get to my part, because I do think there is an intersection between, like you shared, the way AI is going to change the landscape. You know, there's a really good book called AI Superpowers by Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, and the premise of the book at the end is, how do we create a world where we have more love and compassion? Like that's sort of like everybody's idealistic vision for a world with AI, is we have, like, you know, different learning spaces. We're challenging the different systems and structures that have held us back for many years, have really limited the very human elements of who we are. But how we get there, I think, is really sort of like the challenge for us to address. And I think being able to leverage, because to your point, that imagination that you talk about, it's not that people don't have it, it's that it needs to be revived. And there have to be certain experiences. And I just keep going back to like everything you said about like love and people believing in you, because it is probably the number one thing that we see in most places. Either people don't believe in themselves or they don't believe in what's possible. And listening to you really made me realize that it really must start internally. Like if you don't have, so if you don't have sort of have that experience of love and you don't have that belief in yourself, how are you going to go out into the world and believe in other people and believe in bigger possibilities about tackling these very large traditional systems that exist? And so I think that sort of that piece, and the one thing that I also heard from you that I thought was really interesting was, you know, we talk a lot about the whole child, right? And I feel like in sort of like Western terminology, it's I don't want to say vague, but the way you kind of outlined it as like fitra, nafs, akal, qalb, and ruh, like I'm just curious to kind of hear your thoughts, really sort of from both of you, because you know, Takar, you also mentioned sort of like the difference you see between the developed world, like the states and whatnot, and the emphasis we place on things. What is that friction point that you feel like maybe one can learn from the other as we think about redesigning some of these systems, sort of in that spirit of empathy? What can we really learn from maybe places that we're not exposed to, that most people don't even travel to, in trying to create these new structures?
Okay, it's a question to me. I think, you know, I think I was Japan, and maybe this school called UCLA went through the threshold. No, no, you know, these students went through some kind of competitions. You know, they think they are very good. Okay, but sometimes they don't know what's going on in the world, and so when you're talking to students, they analyze things. You know, so for example, you know, when you ask them what is this with a coffee cup, and what they see is, oh, this is circle, this straight line, the rectangle, it's a ceramic. They don't say that's coffee inside. Interesting, right? And they don't say hot. Okay, that is the first thing I teach them. You know, so how can you observe instead of analyze? You know, that is the kind of things that both of you have been talking about. It's that we need to be holistic, and when we do, especially when you do PhD, you have to be in actually objective. So you have to have a kind of evidence. So always you try to narrow down the topic, but the truth is that always you need to zoom out. You can observe from that. So it's a kind of, I say it's a topic you're talking about inclusiveness. I say, you know, holistic, and so it's very difficult to make that to the, you know, paper, but you know, it's really the time to go back how we used to look at the kids. And I think I can tell you one more thing. You know, one student at Harvard made a question to me, and how can you learn? How could you learn so much about children? And I said, yeah, you know, you have a girlfriend, you're going to get married, you said, right? Yes, I am. You're going to have a baby, do you? Oh, yes, I'm going to have a baby. And then that is where you understand the kids. And so, you know, these, you know, these the clever student at the UCLA, the MIT, and the Harvard, you know, they forget to observe. That's the problem. We are having these good schools, especially among the professors. I found the professors are useless. Okay, anyway, sorry, I can give back to you.
Okay,
So-
I think
Okay, so I have a question. Yes, Professor.
I think time is up for your second term.
But
If you
I
have a
think it's
question,
perfect. Good.
go ahead.
I think it's okay. Go. You can take it to mine. It's okay. I just have a very small
You
part.
can
to
go
fill.
ahead. If you have a
You can
question,
go.
please.
Yeah.
I mean, I have two more questions. The first one for my colleagues is, we're talking about an AI future. We're talking about the schools that we need in the future. We're talking about the importance of love and of nature and of connection to nature. You can't protect and fight for an environment that you don't love. We need to have children fall in love with nature, to want to protect it and to be part of it and to realize their position in it. So my question is, how can we, okay, as we've all seen, AI can be used to enhance one's thinking and creativity, or it can be used to outsource one's thinking. And there's nothing worse than reading from my students something that AI wrote. To me, it just feels like a devastating waste of time. Like I'm just reading what a computer pumped out. So I've gotten to the point with this where I embrace their mistakes. I want to see that this is the student talking. I want to hear a voice that is personal and gritty and has errors in it and mistakes and is real. So my question to both of you is, how can we ensure that our learners foster creativity and use AI to extend, expand, and enrich rather than outsource?
Can I talk first?
I would love you to. Yes, I was going to say, please.
Our answer is you can't do anything about it. And do you know, in the last century, people thought computer creates future. Okay, so if you look at the movie called Tron, people get sucked into the computer game. They fight in the game. It's a fluorescent lights, those things are very computer-aided image. But if you look at the movie called Matrix, the things going on in the Matrix, it's much more rarer than the real world. So, AI or this technology exists like air. So you don't know anything about. But actually, that's what's happening. So I think you and me, maybe it's a dinosaurs, and they got different kind of brain functions. Okay, so and also I think just all these AI also can be used for any kind of education. So, and I think just because of the AI, you can go to Django and Borneo, and some kids don't like to go to Borneo because they want to stay in the city. But I think it's fine. People are diverse. Okay, but I think AI extend the possibilities. That's what's happening. So don't even try to control them, because we are not manipulators. You are not God. Just leave it, and so that is all you can do. I think AI will do something, opening possibilities. That's what I have to think. Is it okay?
I mean, I've just seen I've seen a distinct difference between a student who's using AI to extend their own thinking, and they do it in a multi-layered, very creative way, whereby it takes them to a place where they wouldn't have been able to go without it. So it's this idea of like enhancement of oneself versus just kind of, look, I need to get this essay done fast. I'm just going to put the most basic prompt into AI and it generates an essay. So I'm just asking, I'm talking about, it's not about AI versus no AI. It's about creative AI versus
I think you're talking. I think you are talking about bad students, the good students. It doesn't matter. I take care of the good student. If they don't study, I think just they can leave. They can do something else. And don't worry about the bad student. They understand it someday. Maybe after you retire from university. That is what it is. Actually, in the old time, we had to make a certain standard for every people in the class. But I think that time is gone. If somebody doesn't want to study, maybe the person, the girl or boy are not ready. And when they're ready, they start using AI. And I think that is what it is. I wouldn't worry about it.
Maybe I will do a little bit of a middle ground between the two sort of different perspectives and do something a little bit, because I do think that, when we think about when we think about idea generation, and we think about, this is why we also really emphasize agency, because I think with many technologies, like social media, for example, we do see how algorithms can have a control on you and can influence you and make you make choices that maybe you otherwise might not make. Like we often hear from and I think this is I can't say I personally support this, but I do think we see a lot of places that want to just ban technology now, whether it's cell phones, whether it's AI, whether it's these things. And I think it's because we don't have the structures in place to integrate and support these technologies. We have very traditional systems, right, that don't really support learner growth and child development. And on the other hand, we have emerging technologies that, that do support those elements in many ways. And so you have a lot of friction now between these two systems. So I was actually just going to share this one example, because I do think a lot of times people attend sessions like this, or, and many different types of conferences that people attend, or the ideas that we have right now about what we know we need to change. I think there's a very unanimous sentiment that we know what it is that we need to change, right? It's just, how do we do it and what do I do? So is my screen coming through?
Yes, very good.
Okay, wonderful. So this is a framework that we have. And a lot of times when people share prompting frameworks, it's very much geared for the AI. This framework is a little bit unique in that you can use it with AI or without AI. It doesn't really matter. It's really designed to spark, we say. It's really designed to create a human spark. So meaning that we want people to start talking to each other first before they start going to the AI, so that they're really developing those ideas in collaboration with. And so this basically is you can think like a coffee shop conversation, kind of like exactly what we had right now, right? Here's my situation. I'm teaching this class. I have some students who are using it well, and some students who are just turning in these AI generated pieces, right? And my problem is, I'm going to literally just use your framing right now because it was so well kind of articulated. And your problem is I want to see the messiness of their work, right? I don't want to see perfection. I want to see the messiness of their work, right? And your aspiration is your dream outcome. So your ideal scenario. So if I was to ask you, in an ideal scenario, what would you want to see from your students as they share what they've learned with you?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. What would you say? Because I feel like I got the first two parts of your...
No, I have the most amazing example of exactly what I want to see. So I was teaching some teachers how to integrate, the topic was social and emotional learning. And I was also teaching them about cultural relevance. And I'm in Saudi Arabia. So I had some male teachers who were trying to merge between social and emotional learning and the values of their culture, and to be able to bring it alive in the elementary classroom. It was a complicated pedagogical task. So what these boys did is they first of all thought about what kind of values from their culture that they wanted to bring to life. And then they chose a pedagogical delivery. They actually, which I'll tell you about after, and they used AI to bring these cultural values and help them write a story that was set in the Arabian desert. And then once they had their story, they edited, they revised with AI, and then how they shared it with their elementary children is that they had a storyscape of fabric and small wooden animals, and they told their story in real time. So for me, that's an example. That's my aspiration. It's a multi-level engagement with AI that extends upon the ideas and the skills that the teachers are bringing to AI. And it takes
Oh, sorry. No, I was gonna say it sounds like it's not even like a multi-level just with the AI. It's multi-level even just in with the people they're interacting with, right? Like bringing in that elementary lens is so beautiful. So like you're like an even more advanced user where it's like, okay, let's attach examples of like ideal like work samples and things like that. But you can see over here just but to recap for the audience. So if you're not familiar, first of all, when we're talking about AI tools, AI is a very broad field. I think right now specifically we're talking about generative AI like ChatGPT. And when you go into these tools, it's open-ended. You can type something and ask something like that. So this here is a framing for how to ask what it is you are looking for. So she shared her situation, professor working with students, problem. Some of them are using AI in a good way. Some of them are using it not in a good way. Her aspiration is that she sees the messiness of the work. The result, she shared a beautiful example right now. And the last one is what we call Kismet. And the last one is we're not asking AI for an answer. We're looking for inspiration. What are 3 to 4 ideas that you have for me that might inspire me to try something or solve this problem that I have in this way? And so I feel like your example was like so much more authentic because it was like real and in the moment. But this is kind of what an example of the prompt would look like that you would draft before you go to the AI tool. And the goal really is, of course, not every time you use AI, you're going to talk to somebody else. But the goal is that when we are really trying to redesign curriculum, redesign spaces, redesign, like hopefully people in the audience have inspiration from what they heard today. And they're like, yeah, how can I do that? The idea that you would like kind of write this out. And now when you come into ChatGPT, you just copy and paste it in. And you can see here now, instead of giving you a answer, it's going to give you ideas. And what I personally find so fascinating is when people see these ideas, it's like 10 seconds ago, ideas that weren't there for them. Now they have their own ideas. They don't even really want the ones here, or they might be inspired by one here, but they might be like, oh, okay, like the idea of a community action documentary. That sounds interesting. Like, and then the next step is like, okay, well, how do I do that? I only have a week of instruction. We have this many class minutes. I have to do XYZ. I've got this many students. And this is where, like, even in spaces, like we have these kinds of spaces, or we don't have any kinds of fun learning spaces where these kids can go and film this documentary they're working on. What could I do as an alternative? Who might I partner with as well? And so this is basically what we call having like an AI mindset to address the challenges of today. Because previously, I feel like the one most people will be familiar with is like growth mindset, right? We all know fixed mindset people, right? I doubt there is a fixed mindset person sitting at this conference right now. All of us are probably growth mindset, but fixed mindset people are like, nothing's going to change. Everything's broken. And going back to, this is why I think I really resonated what you shared earlier about love and people believing in you. People with a fixed mindset, it's not that they don't like change. They often get categorized in a certain way. These are people that they don't have hope. They don't have agency. They don't believe that something is possible. And it quite possibly could be. Nobody's given that to them, right? People with a growth mindset tend to have strong communities. They're people who believe they can improve things, people who believe they can make a difference. But at the end of the day, even though they have high levels of hope, we say they have limited agency because we're just human at the end of the day. We can only have so many hours and do so many things. But people who have an AI mindset, these people have high hope and high agency because they believe something is possible. They also are okay that they don't know the answer, but they believe if I can bring together the right people and I can use my AI tools together in that collaboration, we can create something better, maybe something new, and maybe not even better or new, something that is more relevant for today and especially for the young people of today, because I think like Suya shared really well that they're completely different, right? Than we're going to be. But there are, I think, still really important elements of both spaces that need to be honored, from critical thinking to relationship building. I do think, I think it's one of the things that has been lost in the last decade is we don't teach anymore how to interact with these new elements. They're just integrated into our society by companies, and everybody just has to figure it out. And so without, I think, that communication, that empathy, that discussion, that dialogue about what do these technologies mean for us, how do we adapt, and what are we going to do, it's very hard to expect that everybody will just figure that out themselves at like 6, 7, 8, 10, even 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. So hopefully this is a helpful tool that we really hope people can take back with them to try and implement some of the ideas that hopefully you've heard.
Dr. Seva, I just want to say something that it's a really beautiful approach, thinking about it like that. And I love this idea. So and I'm thinking about it as kind of a general maxim, which is, even if you don't type into the prompt, give me 3 or 4 ideas, that we actually actively teach students to consider any result of AI to be 3 or 4 ideas. Right? And if we think, don't ever take it as a finished product, only take it as ideas, then that would be a way they would have to ask themselves, now what? What's my next step? Right? So I'm going to use my own brain now to build upon what ChatGPT just spat out.
Yeah.
I think
and I go back to even Tezuka, like your background. Like I used to work at Apple, and one of the things that we used to talk about a lot at Apple was like space and collaboration, and how spaces are. So like your image reminds me a lot of like where I used to work. But I think it is the combining of elements. I think so often we see things as mutually exclusive. It's this or it's that. It's this or it's that. We need this or that. We focus on one thing, but I think it's really like the coming together of the different pieces to be able to, I think, just accelerate the work. I mean, the work really needs to be accelerated in this moment. There are too many people that don't have the luxury of those learning spaces, that don't have the luxury of a caring adult with the relationships around them. And so I really believe that like AI tools can really help us get out of our own way and accelerate, I think, this very important work.
Maybe I should talk now. I think that since you understand what AI is saying, maybe I should talk about cognitive function in neuroscience. I'm very much interested in. I used to write a program with machine language since 1980s, and I was really into analysis, and I turned to be architect. So I'm something between, and I found out the boundary between AI and EI are getting very, very blur, and that is a process is very similar to the one with the midbrain for people cortex in the upper surface, upper, and then just you bring up some kind of the gestalt, so it's a linear knowledge, into the more analysis. I think I say I'm going into more specific, but my point is that as the AI is becoming a part of brain, so you can't disconnect that from people anymore. But then I can tell you what's going to happen. I think give up is the answer. Give up. You may think give up is bad, but it's good. Give up means you accept the change. And if you professor don't accept, you will be called obsolete. But when you accept these change, young people will say, "Oh, you are wise." And what happens? You don't need the classroom anymore because you can study many things. Actually, it happened to my daughter. My daughter had a really learning problem. Then AI is going to kind of as a pad. Computer learning started. In a half year, she caught up and she went to the top in a half year. So what happened is that I found out she feel more comfortable getting knowledge from computer or internet than teacher. So for her, a classroom has never been needed. So I think that as an architect, what I've been doing is maybe school without wall. Instead, I'm teaching at UCLA. That I found out all students want to draw desk and chair. I'm having a very hard time to tell them, we don't want the table and the chair. Okay, where do you study? And then I found out they are studying on the field. If you go to Harvard and the Harvard Green, these people are studying about quantum physics on the green. That's what happened. So I think AI is going to free us, but still children need us. That is something we are talking about, love and compassion. In the Indian school, the monk who started saying, if you hug these often, 8 times a day, they start deactivate their compassion. And then, amazingly, 95% of them go to university. While in India, only 20% go to university. And that 9 out of 10 best students in region are from that orphanage. So all these things are connected. Okay, I finished.
Do you think that there are certain parts of the world and cultures that that's easier for than others, or will be easier for than others?
I think I would say India, because India has been diverse. Okay, there has been differences, but I think once AI comes in, their life has been changing. Even you go to the poorest village, they got the tablets like this. They have this. Now it's even the poorest child got access to knowledge, and they're connecting each other, and also they accept differences. But at the same time, they know how to change their life. I think that the change is coming from India, not from Europe, not from the United States.
Yeah,
I think I'd say, these Ivy League schools are obsolete.
I think many people might agree.
Okay,
All right.
so
Anybody else would like to say more? Because closing time is coming. Then
I think just the session has been extremely successful. And my suggestion is you should make another session for us to make continuation. Thank you very much.
Okay. It was a nice discussion in the second round, mainly based on use of AI in education and the competitiveness. I would say something also considering competitiveness. I think first we have our children to gain some skills and knowledge to compete himself or herself first, then to compete with others. Because if anyone cannot compete himself or herself, cannot compete with others. Concerning AI, of course, we cannot escape from using AI in our educational activities, but we should not be a prisoner of the AI, because to me, again, human being produces ideas, but the AI combines the ideas. We should differentiate for these two. Okay? Then traditionally, I'm trying to close now. Traditionally, we can say that education has three basic tasks. These are to preserve, develop, and transmit values and experiences. So education formally carries out these tasks in schools, which is why schools are extremely important for scientific sustainability. The concept of school culture can be expressed also, can be considered here as a school atmosphere from another perspective. The more constructive and scientific atmosphere is, the more impressive it will be. So this message is perhaps the main idea of today's panel. With these thoughts, I'd like to thank you for your participation and valuable contributions. And also, I'd like to thank our participants once again. I hope to meet to such a productive educational activities like this one in the future, and I present my regards to all participants and our panelists. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you. It was really nice to meet all of you.
Thank you so much to our moderator, Professor Akyol, and our esteemed panelists. There has been one consistent message that has been expressed during every single panel, really, throughout the last 2 days, and that is it's imperative to keep that relationship between the educator and the student very strong. It needs to be robust, genuine, and engaging to achieve the change that we so deeply need moving forward. Thank you all so much for being with us at the Istanbul Education Forum.